So, hello everybody, welcome to a new episode, Mix with Daniel. This time it will be the question, could you mix a song without any equalizer? It will be really interesting. Stay tuned. When I did my seminar with Al Schmidt and George Mossenberg, Al Schmidt, many of you know, he is working without the EQ on his recording. And later on, when Fritz Frey, a journalist of a German magazine, asked me whether if it's true that those tracks recorded by big American sound engineers are so good that you could mix them without an EQ. Well, I thought this question was rather interesting because I think it's not so difficult to record tracks on which you don't need an EQ. I usually mix with EQ because I learned to work with the EQ. And for me, the EQ is nothing bad. But I thought it would be really interesting to take a production that I recorded and I mixed and mix it with EQ. So first, let's hear how the mix sounded that I did on this board with EQ, with compressor and with everything half a year ago.
Sind Meere auf Reisen. Zugfahren ist Fließen auf Gleisen. Und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Igel, Kakteen.
And so on, and so on. Now, if you work without an equalizer, how could you get all those colors? How could you get the highs on instruments that you need high frequencies? How could you get the basses? Well, one important thing for sure is music must be played in a room that actually fits the music. If you record a grand piano in a small room that is boxy sounding, then this boxiness is on the recording. If you use microphones that are boxy sounding, that's on the recording. If you want to hear top end on the snare, you need to have a microphone that is actually recording it. And Al said that he learned to equalize with the microphone. He uses the right mics and he turns it. And I think on that production that happened too. We actually recorded it directly in that control room here because the producer wanted to have a more intimate sound than on the last CD with Jasmin, which we recorded in a huge studio. So here we have intimate tracks, and let's see how they sound. And then if you work without an equalizer, you usually do the coloration with the sound of the compressors or of other thing or with a board. So actually if you want to have high frequency content, you choose a compressor where you know it has nice high frequencies. Or if you need a powerful bass without equalizer, you choose a compressor that is giving you this powerful bass. So let's quickly hear just all those tracks that we heard in the mix. Without the mix, I just put them roughly to the board. No rough mix yet, no reverb, no inserts, just the pure tracks. That's how it sounds.
Sind Meere auf Reisen. Zugfahren ist Fließen auf Gleisen. Und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Igel, Kakteen, die gehen. Fenster sind gläserne Mauern und Berge sind Wellen, die dauern. Pogen ist Tanzen mit Prügeln, Kamele sind Pferde mit Hüten.
So, and now it's all about what do you do with those tracks. I will quickly start with the drum.
Sind Meere auf.
So that's nothing special. Bass drum, a snare. All I prepared is 1176 on the bass drum and another one on the snare. Let's put it in. And that just gives you a little more meat, right? Again, without. And with. Perfect. In jazz, you really don't need a lot. You don't need to actually hear the compressor. As I said before, I just chose that box because of the box tone. Let's quickly listen the overheads. And actually, on the overheads, we have 2 microphones, if I remember correctly. I put old vintage M49s, Neumann M49s, which I love as overhead microphone. They give me all I usually need, but because the producer requested to also have coils, I hope I remember right, I will also have coils, so let's quickly check. Yeah, okay. Here are the 49s. And the coils. Now I quickly hear both in the mix. So I first start with the M49. I mute the coils. And let's put the check out. Now the same thing, but with the coils. Probably we have to make them a little bit louder. And that might be a good exercise to actually train the ears. You can go back and listen to this forever. What is the difference? Well, the coils, yes, they sound a little bit warmer, but the coils also record more of the room. And because the room wasn't super big, I actually don't want to hear that portion of the room because it also makes the drum sound more little. Also, as we are going to mix without an equalizer, actually I want this high frequency content that the M49s are producing. So we're going with the M49. I show you again both that you can hear it. First, the coils. Now the M49. And that is just a little bit more silky sounding. It's a little bit more what we need. Now for the overhead, I also prepared Rehe 11D78. Let's hear how that sounds. I put it in now. It's a little bit louder. I try to compensate for the volume. We still hear it with the 1178. Without. And as you can hear, without, actually many little details are lost. And with, let's hear it with, it's there. It's a little bit more creamy sounding, more meat, a little bit more highs. And of course we have to listen it everything together. Otherwise it doesn't make any sense. So we are listening everything together and the overhead are compressed, and then I put the compressor out and I will try to compensate for the volume. And out. And back in. Perfect. Let's go to the piano. I remember we had C12s from AKG, old one. They sound like this. And I also put 2 Browner VM1s. They sound like this. I also put 2 old Neumann U47. I think I placed them next the head of the player to get the player's perspective. And U47s are great for that. Also, I chose the U47s because they sound very warm, and because the Steinway piano was a great Steinway, but not on the cold side, but for sure a Steinway in the room we had is not something that really is producing any warmth. So for that I was also using the U47. The sound of them. Okay, now the close mics. I actually remember that I liked the VM1s together with the C12. That would be that thing here. And we could have also compression for it. Now, what do we want? Maybe a little bit more a silky top end. So I basically would like to have like an API style of compression, but less aggressive. And the best thing here is a Neumann compressor. I don't even know the name of it. Let me look how this thing is. U473A. Let's put it in. First without. And with. Without. And with. Let's again hear if we can hear it in the mix. We start with the compressor engaged.
Regen sind Wolken,
Without.
die welken und Regenvorschläge, die gelten.
And with. And again, it's just a little bit more smiling and you don't lose the harmonics. And if you want to mix without an EQ, the most important thing is that you don't lose the high frequency harmonics, because all the upper harmonics are very low in volume. Usually you push them by just equalizing them just a little bit, but if not, you need to have a compression. But let's say these two, all the compression that we set here are set to a very moderate gain reduction. They hardly do more than maybe 2 dBs. It's really way more about getting the color of the box. Okay, let's go quickly on. We have a bass. And as you can hear, I mean, actually on all instruments are really recorded in a way that you really don't need a lot of EQ. Although if I would mix this again, I would use EQ. But also with this bass, yeah, there's not much more that you could wish if you have such a track. I mean, it's obviously also one of the greatest bass player in Germany. I should maybe blend in the name because I forgot. Let's see what I did. I put in the compression. Now, let's make it softer. Without. With. And as you can see, and this is something I always do in jazz, I make it a little bit more punchy, more hard, because finally you only have 2 speakers and the membranes of the speakers are moving. If you have a double bass, but you also want to have the bass from the piano, you want to have some bass from the singer, you want to have some bass from the bass drum, actually it's just too much information for everything to really get in a movement nicely. So usually you want to get a little bit more aggression on the bass, like he would just play a little bit harder, and this can be done very easy with compressors. What I often use for a bass is actually a cheap compressor, the Stein SA2A, so basically their version of LA2A. The Stein is a little bit slower. It's not actually close to the real LA2A, but it's a great bass compressor. But then we also go through a German tube compressor, Rockrüppel Comp 1. I have one of the first they ever did. It's a pure tube design. It's beautiful. It gives a lot of size. It's a huge sound. Let's hear that thing in the mix. We start with the compressor engaged.
Regen sind Wolken, die welken.
Let's hear the same spot without the compressor.
Mit Hügeln.
I think you can hear it quite good, although I did it louder now, but it's too soft to compete with the band. So either you remove some basses of the bass drum and you would remove bass from the piano, which a lot of mixers are doing, and you would maybe remove some warmth of the vocal. However, the other way is just make the bass more strong. And let's hear it again without. Let's hear it with. I'll make it a little bit softer because it gets louder anyway.
Regen sind Wolken, die welken und Regen.
And it's not just a difference of level. You might think that it's louder compressed, but it's not true. It's just every tone gives the fundamental structure that this music needs, and that's why the level seems right with compressor. And without compression you never get it right, because it's either too loud or not too loud. It's either too loud or too soft, but it never will be right. It's actually like the bass part of a building. It needs to be stable, and if the bass in the music has no stability, then the entire mix cannot live on top of it. So bass stability is so important. It's only with good compression it's possible. Good recording comes first, but then a good mix, good compression. We go quickly to the vocal. Let's just stay in the mix and I switch in the compression. Or let's first listen without again, and let's actually quickly listen what we would like to get and then look if we get it with the compression. So without.
Regen sind Wolken, die welken und Regen.
Let's hear the same part of the music with the compressor.
Regen sind Wolken, die welken und Regenvorschläge, die gelten.
So basically here it's very similar again. Finally, always in a jazz mix, the vocal is what you want to hear close and what you just want to hear with every detail possible. I don't want that any part that she's singing is going under the band and could maybe not be heard or not be understood. If you don't compress it, you have to make it too loud. And then on the louder parts that she is singing, it's not sounding good because then it's too loud. And if the vocal is too loud, actually the band is like not loud enough. So actually I did several compressors here in a row, and I have to actually read it because I forget it. First we just go to a treble by a Siemens EQ, but the EQ is switched to totally off. So everything we are hearing, or all we are hearing, is the treble of that unit because it sounds very silky but also very smooth. However, then we go to a 1176 because that's just a really good vocal compressor. Then I thought, because we recorded her in Hansa studio, which was not a huge room, but a great studio, I want to have a little bit of warm sound again, so I chose a VT7 compressor to give it a little bit warmth, but then at the same time I wanted to have a silky top end. So for the silky top end I also inserted a TubeTech CL1B compressor, and at the end that gives us our sound. Let's hear again some bars with the compressor and then I switch it to off.
Regen sind Wolken, die welken und Regen.
Now without.
Regen sind Wolken, die welken und Regenvorschläge.
Again with.
Regen sind Wolken, die welken und Regenvorschläge.
Okay, you hear it very good on the word welken, because the welken you wouldn't understand without the compressor, and with the compressor it's just nicely there. And there's not a lot of compression. Every of that gear that I chosen to work with the vocal track, it's just doing a little bit, but not a lot. Finally, there are some brass tracks and some string tracks, but yeah, let's do this real quick. The brass just have a tube tech multiband compression, and the strings have nothing. Now the next important thing is actually reverb and actually get the levels just right. So let's actually mix this thing.
Man ist Fließen auf Gleisen und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Igel, Kakteen, die gehen. Man ist Fließen auf Gleisen und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Igel, Kakteen, die gehen. Fenster sind gläserne Mauer und Berge sind Wellen, die dauern. Pogen ist Tanzen mit Prügeln, Kamele sind Pferde mit Hügeln. Regen sind Wolken, die welken und Regelvorschläge, die gelten. Man ist Fließen auf Gleisen und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Igel, Kakteen, die gehen. Fenster sind gläserne Mauer und Berge sind Wellen, die dauern. Pogen ist Tanzen mit Prügeln, Kamele sind Pferde mit Hügeln. Regen sind Wolken, die welken und Regeln Vorschläge, die gelten. Man ist Fließen auf Gleisen und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Igel, Kakteen, die gehen. Fenster sind gläserne Mauer und Berge. Man ist Fließen auf Gleisen und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Man ist Fließen auf Gleisen und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Igel, Kakteen, die gehen. Fenster sind gläserne Mauer und Berge sind Wellen, die dauern. Man ist Fließen auf Gleisen und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Man ist Fließen auf Gleisen und Regeln, Vorschläge, die gelten. Regeln, Vorschläge, die gelten.
let's maybe quickly say something to what we actually did and what I just did now where I stopped. Actually I've seen me mixing it with the faders, and I just put some reverb from the console to the mix. The console only has 4 auxiliary sends, which is not really a lot, but that's how it was with vintage consoles. So either you want this color and you accept you only have 4 reverbs. So actually I usually have a Bricasti here on my aux N1. I have a Lexicon 960, which has several reverbs. I just put machine A on auxiliary 2. And auxiliary 3 is a 480, and auxiliary 4 is also a 480. And those are basically my reverbs to create sauce, and that's why I like to have them from the desk, because as they're a post fader, if I put a fader down, the reverb is going down too. However, in the studio we have several other high-end reverbs. So one of my favorite is the Sony sampling reverb. What's the name? DRE777. It's a huge, great sounding machine, and actually Sony really recorded nice studios in the United States and all over the world, and it's recorded so good that it really sounds nice. And because we recorded that production in not so large rooms, I actually like to put a little bit Sony on top, as on top of the sauce reverbs too. So let's quickly hear only that snare. I make it louder. That's with the Sony. Might be a little bit too much, but then you hear what happens. Now I put the Sony away. Again, into it. Let's quickly mute the other reverbs I gave, which was a room of the Lexicon 480. And a little bit Bricasti, so now everything is removed. Totally dry, just a snare mic. Now with the Sony. Just a nice room. Let me make it a little bit louder, it's a little bit soft at the moment. And the same thing I gave to the brass players, because brasses need normally a little bit larger room. If you don't have it, sampling reverb is something great. Just give it a little bit room, and then the beefy reverbs like Lexicon 480 to me is like to give sauce to it. So let's put back that fill on the snare, and let's put it back here. So, and what is anyway important, and moreover, if you mix without an equalizer, or if you would want to mix a great mastering compressor, L often uses the TubeTech multiband compressor, which are a little bit stupid, but we already used that thing for the brass. However, I like the undertone audio Unfairchild very much, because it gives you some presence in the bass frequencies, and it gives you a nice silky top end. And let's throw that thing onto the mix bus.
Und Regelvorschläge, die gelten.
And now with the Unfairchild.
Und Regelvorschläge, die gelten.
Unfortunately, the Unfairchild doesn't have output gain, so it's a little bit louder, but you can hear clearly that the bass is coming in front again, but in a very good way, and that the vocal is clear. Everything is connected, but also everything is more sparkling. Let's do it again. I try to compensate it a little bit by riding the master fader here. We start with the compressor and then I switch it out.
Und Regelvorschläge, die gelten.
Without.
Bücher mit Löchern. Pfauen sind Vögel mit Fächern.
So now let's compare it to the mix I originally did for this production. I don't expect that this one will sound as good, obviously, because we mixed quite a long time at this song. We really did careful reverb design. Now I just basically switched some reverbs onto it that I tweaked just a little bit. I also didn't really tweak the compressors. I actually prepared about 10 minutes before we shot this video, so I mean the compressor settings could be better, but they're not bad. It's just a quick example to show you that you could mix without an EQ if you wanted, that it's absolutely possible to record tracks with nice instrument in a nice room and the right microphones, and then not to do EQ if you wish to do so. So let's make a comparison. It will be fun. So actually, somewhere should be my recorded tracks. Actually, that black thing here, that's the mix I recorded half a year ago. Whenever you see the green thing here on, it means input monitor, input recording monitoring, no, input monitoring, then you hear the mix we did now. Whenever I switch it to that mode, you hear the recorded mix, and we probably quickly have to make some gain staging. So, CD mix.
Sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Igel, Kakteen.
My new mix without EQ.
Sind Schlaf mit Ideen.
A little bit too loud.
Igel, Kakteen, die gehen. Fenster sind gläserne Mauern und Berge sind Wellen.
Again the CD mix.
Sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Igel, Kakteen.
It's a new mix.
Sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Igel, Kakteen.
Tweak it.
Die gehen. Fenster sind gläserne Mauern und Berge.
Oh yeah, I mean actually it's not so bad. It's really funny. I mean, a quick 10-minute mix on a beautiful board with beautifully recorded tracks that I spent really a lot of love into record those tracks, but I'm surprised, I have to say it, because actually I think that mix is near as good, if not better, than the original CD mix with EQs. I don't miss any frequencies. I don't miss anything. I actually like the reverbs. I like the compression. Yeah, and it was done now in about probably 10-20 minutes. That's really a short time. And everything is there. So without EQ, making a mix, well, actually now where I tried it, I probably do it more. Because the point is, all EQs are changing phases. I didn't really care about this because I love EQs and I have great EQs here. However, if you don't need it, why not to try it without? So to me, this lesson actually, also for myself, it's a huge surprise. I never ever would have thought that it would be so pleasant to my ears. That's an uneffortless listening of this song. Nothing is missing. Everything is there. Everything is nice. I'm really surprised. So, and finally, if a production is finished, it needs great mastering. We actually have 3 mastering. One is by JENSEN, which is a great mastering engineer. I always like to work with him. The other one is Brian Lucy from Magic Garden Mastering, which I also love. He does a lot of my pop mixes. And the third mastering is actually my HOTREF, because I'm also a mastering engineer. We do a lot of mastering here, but on that production, I've chosen to not be the mastering engineer, although the producer wished that I would do the mastering. But I think if you do mixing session for long, actually you want a fresh pair of ears. So I don't want to be the mastering engineer. But for him, I did a quick mastering, just that he could listen to mixes loud, and I made, corrections might be the wrong word, because if a mix is good, you don't need to do any correction. You just give colors. There is not really anything to correct. And I think it would be interesting to show you those masters. So at the moment we have just file 1, 2, and 3. Let's see if we can tell the difference. File 1, and I quickly looked that they are more or less as loud.
Gleisen und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Igel, Kakteen, die gehen. Fenster sind gläserne Mauern und Berge.
So that was file 1. Let's hear file 2.
Gleisen und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Igel, Kakteen, die gehen. Fenster sind gläserne Mauern und Berge sind Wellen.
Let's hear once more file 1 again, and I make file 1 tiny little bit softer. So again, file 1.
Gleisen und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Igel, Kakteen, die gehen.
Once more, file 2.
Gleisen und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen.
And file number 3.
Gleisen und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen. Igel, Kakteen, die gehen. Fenster sind gläserne Mauern und Berge.
Let's also reduce the level just a little bit. Again, file number 2.
Gleisen und Träume sind Schlaf mit.
File number 3.
Gleisen und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen.
File number 1. Last time.
Gleisen und Träume sind Schlaf mit Ideen.
So, I'm actually wondering if you can tell the difference. Post comments about what you are hearing. File number 1 is Ted Jensen. What I hear is a little bit more warmth, just a little bit more compressed. File number 2 is by Brian Lucy. That's what we have chosen to be on the CD. I like the top end of the file number 2 very much. It's also not so heavy, but it also doesn't need the heaviness. And file number 3 is just a quick digital mastering only that I did, the HOTREF, no analog gear on it. Just basically, I don't remember. I think it's an EQ, but more for the color. It didn't do anything. I often just insert an equalizer, but everything is to 0. With analog gear, that's a huge difference because of the treble. But if you use just the plugin, you also get a little bit of that treble sound. It was probably the QuickTech from Waves that was on it, without any boosting or cutting of frequencies. And then it was basically an isotope limiter, and maybe a Phoenix in radiant mode. That's usually what I choose for my HOTREFs. And yeah, I mean, actually file number 3 is like a little bit in between the Ted and Brian Lucy mastering. And although they both choose to use analog gear, I very often, if I mix it with such beautiful analog gear, and there is such a great Tube Master EQ on the mix bus, on this mix, because I said it's without EQ, I didn't use the Tube Master EQ, obviously. But on the original mix, I did. And then there's Unfairchild. You could also say that there is enough analog beauty on the tracks. So actually, if you only mix it, if you only master it in a digital way, you have the benefit of not having a DA and the AD converter. And even if you have great ADs and DAs, which we do, on which absolutely sure the other top guys also have great DAs and ADs, but there is a reduction in quality. You never get DA and AD conversion for free. It's a process, like scanning in a picture, well, it might be scanned in with the best scanner, and then you might print it out with the best printer, but it wouldn't look like the original. So actually, if something is mixed really beautiful, you have to think if you master it analog or digital. I thought here in this master, Moreau from Brian Lucy, actually his analog processing really helped again to get some nice highs. We could just have chosen Ted Jensen's Master 2, it's so nicely warm. Sometimes I listen those 3 files again, I think we should have taken the other one. Sometimes I think we chose the right thing, and sometimes I think we could have just have put my HOTREF onto the CD. Yeah, but those is a difference of 3 mastering things. So let me know what you think about all this. Post comments, ring the bell, subscribe to the channel, and we will have a paid tutorial very soon. I know I say this after every lesson, but now it's actually shot. It's almost finished. It's in the process of the last part of cutting. It will be a nice mixing tutorial. If you want to get informed when we release it, go to my webpage, DanielDettwiler.com, subscribe there, and we will note you. And yes, I hope you liked it. See you soon. Bye.